from Munich, Germany, from Siemens company, from the corporate technology part of Siemens. So Siemens is a very large company that works in a very broad range of domains. So it has a lot, I think in America it's a lot known in the area of healthcare, but they also do trains, building technology, industrial systems, so a lot of things like in critical infrastructure, energy, smart grids, and so on. So we have a very large company, and there's a lot of software, an increasing amount of software in the company. So it's about 17,000 software engineers at Siemens. So in the area, I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, but of course the topic of software architecture is very, very important in such whenever you have software being such a critical part of your company. So a lot of our products are important that they meet, safety, security, regulated requirements, performance, availability, reliability. So it has a lot of the non-functional requirements or quality attributes that are topics that are typically addressed at Siemens. So because the architects are such a critical resource and so very important for the success of our products, we almost 10 years ago now, in 2007, we started a Siemens-wide architecture program. For those of you that have been at the SATURN conference for a longer time, in 2010, you may remember we had a panel discussion here at SATURN where various architecture programs that were set up at various companies and also at the SEI were on a panel discussion together. So there was Rolf Siegers from Raytheon, for example, and Don O'Connell from Boeing, myself from Siemens, Andy Ruth from IASA, and Linda Northrup on a panel in 2010, sort of comparing the different architecture programs, and that this is a common topic. And so we thought that this would be a very appropriate forum here at the SATURN to address this topic, because I hope many of you have also software architects in your company, and there is a lot of added value in bringing these architects together amongst themselves, and also the interface from the architects to other roles in the company. And so I'm hoping that you'll be able to get some information about how we do this at Siemens that you'll be able to also apply in your company when you try to network these key persons together. So our original program was in the area of software architects, and over time we extended this also to system architects, and most recently also to test architects. And we meanwhile have about 400 persons certified by this program. We make a very significant investment in these architects. So like this senior software architect program, they go through 15 days of training, so 3 workshops over a period of like a year, with explicit knowledge gates and certification and so on. So it's really a very intense program. But also what the architects learn at this program is only about 30–40% on architecture itself, because they come into the program already knowing architecture. It's getting them to be more aware and have key means of relating more also to the other roles. Being able that the software architects can speak a common language with the product manager, or with the testing persons, or between the software architects and the system architects, for example. So addressing these other roles, and also very, very important, the soft skills and the social topics is extremely important, because they often cannot say you must do it this way, right? They must really lead by example, lead by encouraging, and that is also the ideas behind our networking approach. We cannot say now you must all network together. We have to do this in a way that we encourage, we offer the opportunities, do everything we can. It's sort of like gardening. We try to have the little plants of the software architects that are starting to talk to each other, and we provide the water and the sun and so on, that this can happen. So the goals that we had was to make sure that our critical projects that we have have an architect person on them that is highly qualified, that they're empowered, that they're aware of what potential blind spots to be aware of, and really have a more open and more agile approach, because a lot of the systems we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, so we don't want to have a sort of a waterfall, big upfront design approach, but we need to be able to make sure to learn from failure, to be able to have the flexibility. And we also use this also to really make sure that we can also acquire external talents. So this program has also been very useful for us as far as software quality benchmarking, for example. It opened the door to get into benchmarking activities with a broad range of other companies to also attract external talent. So externally, it's also been of high relevance to us. So here you can see how we did it over time. We first started with a senior software architect. It was a very small group. So we're talking about like a dozen people per year at a company that has, like, as I said, 17,000 software developers, 400,000 employees. We have this big program addressing these 12 persons per year. And but they are the most critical resource for these successful products. So we make this investment, and then over time we also saw that we wanted to extend the program further, and so that the senior software architects would also be able to sort of shepherd the software architects in their organization. That's also an aspect of networking, that they mentor them. And then we extended in later on in 2012 in both directions. We made the program broader, so we addressed also the system architects, and also going up in the hierarchy added also the R&D manager workshop, because we wanted to not only have teach the architects how to deal with their R&D manager or their product manager, but also the other way around, right? And to also tell the R&D managers, now don't be surprised if your architect comes to you and starts talking about this non-functional requirements and why that's important. So make sure that the pull and the push are there from both sides. And then also the developers and all the other trainings are all aligned to this same approach. Here on this slide, you can see the overview of the topics that we address. They're color-coded. There's 5 main topics that goes through all of our programs. So the business understanding, the architecture, social skills, testing, and requirements engineering. And you can see here the senior software architects have to be really an expert in the architecture and design, and also on governance and guidance, and on the quality requirements, so like the non-functional requirements. And the software architect, that's a little bit more junior architect, doesn't have to be so good on the governance and guidance, because typically the senior software architect would do these things. So the difference between one main difference between the normal software architect and the senior software architect is that the senior software architect is typically doing product line engineering, is responsible for a whole platform product line, as opposed to being the architect of an individual system. Here you can see our guiding principles. They also go through the whole curriculum or whole qualification program that we have. And they're also color-coded here. You can see some of the topics, for example, that Grady Booch mentioned yesterday. The 2 main topics he was talking about was having the regular tact and the iterations and the governance. So we address this tact in this one here, focused on testing with iterative and test-driven design, so having a regular iterations, and of the very number 1 there on the topic of architecture governance across the whole life cycle. And so all of these things, if you look at them carefully, there's a lot of them that have to do with networking. So making sure that the architect is not just on the program, on the product development within some short part of the life cycle, but that he or she accompanies the product throughout the whole life cycle. Here on this number 8, for example, work together as a team, avoid the silo thinking. Make sure that we really address this product with this architecture-driven approach throughout the whole life cycle. And so we're really addressing both the agile and iterative topics as well as the architecture topics, both in a consistent way, and then also accompanying that all the social skills and soft skill topics, so that the architect can also have adequate discussions with the other persons in the team and motivate them. So this consists of the qualification and training itself. There is a certification part of it, but the main topic today is this networking aspect where we really share the best practices across the company. So here it's very important, as I said, to be able to motivate the architects to participate in this. I don't have a stick that I can get them all to come, so I have to provide the carrot that they want to come and that they get benefit out of it. They get benefit from getting information from other architects, and also we do whatever we can to also provide benefit for when they contribute. So I don't have like money I can offer, but I can offer publicity, right? We can have newsletters or so on where they can describe what they're doing, and then their management hears about that. So there's lots of ways that we can get their motivate. You have to figure out what motivates them to be able to contribute or to receive the information. Speak openly about failures, so being able to have a trusted community where they can openly talk about these topics, or even just have the identified persons that are working in a similar area that they can just call up and say, hey Joe, I'm working on this critical topic, blah, blah, blah. How do we do big data in a particular area? That they can talk to somebody that speaks the same language. This is sort of our common language throughout Siemens, and have the trust that they will be willing to make that call, and that they will really get somebody at the other end that also has that same training and that same understanding, that same motivation to really help each other. So it's a mix of both formal and informal meetings. So we have an annual conference, for example, so that's a more formal topic, but we also have informal brown bags, so we will like reserve dinner at a restaurant and say it's going to be on topic X. We get one or two of the architects to propose a topic, and it's like a brown bag, right? So we do the infrastructure and just enable that to happen. In addition to the in-person meetings, we also do a lot of aspects online. So there is a central wiki, in various forms. Some of them are closed so that not all of Siemens, if one person asks a question there, maybe they don't want to embarrass themselves in front of all of Siemens, so they can write in this closed, protected environment, they can ask a question and know that just the persons in their course or that were in the set of courses on software architecture will see this question and provide a reply. So you have to grow over time the trust in the system that you need to be able to really foster this networking. And another thing that we do to also foster such networking is to have such hackathons. So we have a particular topic where we invite the architects to come together, sometimes also with some other roles, to work on a project together for a day, to gain experience on how do software and system architects work well together, for example. And these are sort of like a bonding exercise also, right? If you really do something together that really causes you to have a common experience, and then you really have much less hurdle to then contact a person in future. So there's various dimensions to this networking. As I mentioned, within the particular class, so the class size is fairly small, so 12 to 15 people, so you can, within that one class, for example, with the software architects, or then there's the whole number of runs of the software architects, right? There's been, 20 different runs of the software architect program, and so all of the software architects network together. Also between the various programs, so the software architects and the system architects, and then the networking across the various roles. So for example, with the product manager or the project manager. So this is our view, is that there's a triumvirate of the architect basically representing the technical expertise of the R&D, and then the product manager being responsible for the product over the whole life cycle, and the project manager whose job it is to organize that this product appropriately gets out the door at the appropriate quality and on time and so on. And we address all of these various levels. So we often break our discussions about systems into the technology aspects and the process aspects and also the business aspects. And so we explicitly view across all three of these dimensions as well. Key experts is a particular career option at Siemens, and so many of these software architects or system architects are also key experts in the HR program at Siemens. Within a geographic area, so sometimes we'll have networking events in India or networking events in Germany or networking events in the US. Many cases, we now, as I said, have about 400 of these architects, and in many cases the business units have dedicated groups of these software architects. So in some cases even a business unit might have a organization where they might have 10 of such software architects in a central group, and they are then assigned to work on various projects. Or another one has like a board of architecture board, so that when a new product is coming up, they will propose their architecture to this board of everybody that's been trained with this background, and they'll say, sort of thumbs up, thumbs down on this architecture that's being proposed. The mentoring that I mentioned, and also across the domains. I think that's one of the really fascinating things about Siemens is that we have all of these broad range of topics, right? I was saying from trains to energy to healthcare and so on. And software is really a cross-cutting concern. How we do big data or such topics, there's a lot of commonality across the board. And so being able to take advantage of that by having the architects be networked together is really helpful. It also helps that the software architects maybe move within the company, but stay within the company. So that really helps also keep this architecture vision that we've established going. We've recently done a fairly significant request for feedback from the various architects and got a lot of some examples of feedback that we got back that they find this common understanding that we promote in the architecture courses to be useful, that the holistic approach is very useful. For example, it helps strengthen the voice of the individual architects. So to know that there's this whole army of architects that also would support the view that one particular architect is trying to make in their organization really helps provide a convincing argument. And so it really motivates them to be able to have such. And you can only have that if you really have this network established. Yeah? So in summary, we have this architecture-based training and qualification program is broadly applicable. It's not so detailed. We do not say you must do architecture in a certain way. That would not be possible for the diversity of our products. But we have a way of working with architecture, a way of learning with architecture that we use that is broadly applicable. So there's having this common understanding, and as I mentioned, from both directions, the push and the pull, right? The architects are taught to speak to the product managers in a certain way. They know what kind of topics would a product manager be interested in, and the product manager is likewise informed. Your architecture might contact you and so on. And they get to practice all of these kinds of things in the trainings, right? In their closed, protected environment, when they're 1 week together, just the 12 of them, they will do role play, and how do I explain my architecture in an elevator pitch to my CEO, and so on. And they get then feedback from the other architects, well, you did that well, or you could have improved on this other aspect, and so on. So they get to try this out in a protected environment, and then when they then go out back to their normal job, they're much more able to do this. So having the right balance of a central-driven approach and the grassroots, so enabling the little plants of interest in networking to come up and to support them. Don't over-control them, but motivate and support them. I mentioned being able to make it more publicly known within the company when people contribute their knowledge to the network. Having this open, constructive environment, the focus on social skills is really important. It was a topic, right, that the keynote today also addressed in closing when he was getting on to about the design thinking aspect. You know, this focus on the people aspect is really so critically important as well. Take explicit advantage. A lot of these architects, you know, we've had this program now for almost 10 years, so they move around in the company, right? So we have even a further network of where these persons are, and we can take advantage of that to make sure we even further extend the network. And being able to get immediate benefit, both for the individual themselves as well as for their organization, and whenever possible, making that more visible. That, you know, the individual is getting something back from it, but also their organization is getting something back from it. And as I mentioned, also this bonding where they work on something together. For example, the hackathons I mentioned, or also architecture reviews. So sometimes two senior software architects from Business Unit X and Business Unit Y will go together and do a week-long architecture review of Business Unit Z. Maybe in a totally different domain. You know, maybe the train and the building technology persons go to healthcare or whatever. And that bonding experience really enables them in some future time to, when there's some kind of question arises, that they will be open to discuss that and find answers that they need. So that's a short overview on our program and how we go about managing the network of architects at Siemens. And I hope you've been able to also get some insights for your programs. Yeah? Beth?
Do you have a career track?
Yes, definitely have a career track. There's it's in the R&D job family. There's a software architect and a senior software architect are explicitly in the standard HR programs. And they are also associated with these key experts. So a lot of times the software architect also gets recognized as a key expert. Yeah.
How do you do performance evaluation of architects? Do you have some criteria that they need to fulfill? Because they're not part of the product team, they're not part of the, they're not responsible for a specific aspect.
They would be part of the product team. They'd be evaluated in the product team as everybody else in the product team.
Contributors, or they have
Yeah, as individual contributors in the product team, yeah. Yeah, Patrick?
What's the selection process? How do you get through 17,000 engineers and decide who ends up?
It goes via the HR. There's a very clear list. I could actually share it with you if you like, on how we select the persons. The senior software architects, for example, have to have 5 years experience on an architect in very significant architecture. They have to actually also be currently working on as architect of a product of a particular size and complexity and so on, and they have to explain all that and then go through an entry interview and so on. So it's really quite heavy weight, really, but I think that's also a key, that all of the people in the course have already a similar mindset and a similar experience, so there's not so much delta. You know, we don't have beginners and advanced in the same. We really have a quite narrow, and that really helps, I think. It's really a key success factor, I think. Yeah. Yes?
That approach also, I'm sorry, to add on to what you were just saying, that helps you to keep from dilution or self-nomination, which is something that we've seen that we suffer from in my firm. And who's an architect? Well, yes, I'm an architect. Well, what makes you an architect? Well, I developed this module. So it does help to better delineate support.
Yeah, and maybe another aspect is it feeds on its own. So the senior software architects, for example, they are used when we have the certification of the normal architects, that they are involved in the program or in the pre-selection, so they know already very much in detail what's in the program, and so they know the criteria and can decide who can get in and who not. Yes?
Question, do you have any specific challenges and how you deal with them in terms of intercontinental, let's say, distribution of the architects? Do you have any?
We have some, they're in various countries, so a lot of times we have, for example, product development in India or in the US or in Germany, and so they're involved in those. We have some special challenges for the certification, for example, because normally we do the certification for example, for the Senior Software Architect program in Germany, and so everybody has to come to Germany because there's really very intense, I think there's 3 certifiers and a psychologist that's there, and you have to meet all kinds of German regulations on such certifications. But for the US program, we have a sort of a split situation where we have, they come to Princeton, New Jersey, where corporate technology has offices, and then there's one assessor there that's there in person, and then one other remote from Germany to help ensure that there's a common bar across all of the architects. Yeah.
So I have a question. When you grow architects, you need to use some kind of training, some materials, some
Yes.
concepts. So what organizations would you refer like world class in terms of architectural concepts and all these things? Like Software Engineering Institute, anything else? You mentioned like IASA, right?
Yes.
So these two or anything else?
Well, ISA mentioned only because we were in the panel discussion at 2010 SATURN, but Software Engineering Institute is a big information source, all kinds of online or other information sources in the world. You know, there's conferences like SATURN or other well-established conferences or speakers. We a lot of times have experts come in from other companies and provide insights. And maybe another aspect I should maybe mention is that a lot of what we've had positive experience with the architecture program within the company is a lot of actually what this conference itself is doing, right? You're bringing architects from lots of different companies, you know, from Sony and Raytheon and Boeing and GE and what all, bringing them here together, and then you know, having a common experience in such kind of programs accompanied by training offerings or online content and so on. So there's a lot of this, you know, this networking that's going on that, you know, the N in SATURN is for networking, I think, right? And so it's a lot of commonality here. Yes?
Do you consider soft skills as part of the capabilities or requirement of the software?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It's a first class citizen, yeah, definitely. And that's why we have to have like the psychologists there. They get put on the spot, you know, if you were in a situation X and you had to do this, and they have to then also reply in appropriate way to, you know, if they to be able to pass the exam at the end.
What kind of metrics do you use to measure effectiveness of your program and figure out where to make improvements in the future?
That's not so quantitative, it's more qualitative, but we ask not only the architects themselves for their feedback, but we also ask their organization. So we've, for example, we ask exactly the bosses of the architects, you know, a year after the program or 2 years after the program, have you noticed a change? But it's still more qualitative and not so quantitative. Yeah, yeah, yes?
How long did it take and how did you convince Siemens to invest in a program? It was quite a while ago, and it was fairly clear that there was software was a really important topic for us, and that we needed to make sure that we, you know, manage this topic appropriately. So we had to really make a convincing case early on, but manage that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to take questions separately.